Today's discussion will be about the very well-known festivities that are going to be taking place soon, Lag BaOmer. You know, living in America, it's funny, you know, we do celebrate Lag BaOmer, but I didn't understand the whole concept of the bonfires and how big of an idea it is until coming to Israel. In Israel, for about a month preceding Lag BaOmer, all the kids in Yerushalayim and all over are gathering and collecting all these pieces of wood. I don't know where they find it, but somehow it's a miracle. Every year, they find enough wood to make these huge bonfires everywhere. I don't know where they get it from, because it's wood they find. It's not like they're buying lumber for it. So I guess, I don't know, the Lag BaOmer miracle of finding enough wood every year for these huge, huge bonfires. The other interesting thing I noticed here, only in Israel, you know, it says God's eyes are on Israel all the time, so I'm sure He's protecting everyone, especially the children, is these kids that are even pre-bar mitzvah age. They're running around. They want to make their own bonfires. You know, I walk from my home just across the trail behind a set of buildings, which has an open grass area. And on Lag BaOmer, one kid decides to make his own little fire over here. Another kid making his own fire over there. There's, like, you know, bonfires everywhere, little ones. You know. Sometimes you know, if you collect the age of all the kids together, you can't even reach 21, which would get you a drink in America. Anyway, so because of this whole, you know, extreme, you know, mystery behind the bonfires, so today we're going to talk about, really the title of the class is Going Beyond the Bonfire. We want to know what's really behind this special, unique day of Lag BaOmer. You know, why is it this particular day, the 33rd day of counting the Omer, becomes a day of celebration that hundreds of thousands, you know, beyond 500,000 people, more than 500,000 people visit the grave site of the great, you know, tzaddik, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and all across the world, everything stops and we celebrate this day. How did a particular day in the middle of, you know, the summer become such a essential, you know, special day as in the Jewish calendar? Where is the source, the foundation for such a custom? Can we all get up and pick a new day tomorrow to make it a special festive holiday? Something very strange behind how this day became the great day that it is, and we want to understand how that developed. The second thing we want to really appreciate is, why is it Rabbi Shimon's day? Of all of the tzaddikim that lived throughout the ages, great tzaddikim, there is no great day of celebration for Moshe Rabbeinu, for Avraham, for Yitzchak. Rabbi Shimon, one of the Tanaim in a particular generation, the generation after the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, you know, during the Roman persecution, so he was a great Tana, and no one can even think of it, you know, we can barely even understand how great he was, but still, why should just him particularly, have this unique status as he has a day that we celebrate on Rabbi Shimon's day? And what is the nature of this day? So we're going to try to explore all of these questions today, particularly the sources that we're going to be using to unfold these mysteries is going to be the writings of the Arizal. We know that in the mid-1500s, the Arizal came and was one of the great mystics of his time, living in Tzfat. As a matter of fact, when we look at the writings about him and the stories behind him, he was, you know, perhaps one of the greatest rabbis and mystics that have come into this world since Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. You know, for 2,000 years we didn't see someone like the Arizal. And if we read the stories of the Ari, we can get an idea how great he was. And just think about the Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon is the Rebbe of all Rebbes. You know, there were rabbis, and then there's the Rebbe. And Rabbi Shimon is where all this mysticism and all these great Mekubalim and great Hasidic Rebbes, he's like the source of all of it. It all comes from the Zohar and the revelation of Kabbalah that began in the days of of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So let's get started. Again, the writings we're using as the sources, the Aris, and there's actually a nice book today that was put out by Makubal from today's generation, Rabbi Yaakov Hillel. He gathers a lot of the information and gives some insights, because today we have access to many more manuscripts than some of the older generation rabbis. So he's able to kind of shed some light on one or two particular confusing matters. So we'll use that information as well. The name of the book is Eid Hagal Hazeh. If anyone wants to find it in the bookstores, it's only in Hebrew. But that also, he brings all of the information necessary to get a good handle on what this day is all about. So let us start with a shevach to the great Rabbi Shimon, the high Tana Kadisha, this holy Tana that lived in the times of the great rabbis. He was the student of Rabbi Akiva. Now, Rabbi Akiva was, of course, one of the greatest rabbis ever, not even beginning to learn Torah until 40, and became the greatest sage of his generation. So great was Rabbi Akiva that when Moshe Rabbeinu himself was shown Rabbi Akiva's generation and Rabbi Akiva, many, many years later, and when Moshe was on Har Sinai with Hashem, he was shown the later generations. So he was so affected by seeing Rabbi Akiva that he asked God himself, if you have someone like Rabbi Akiva, then why are you giving the Torah through me? You have here such a person, a unique person that reached the level of shleimut that he did through hard work. So why me? So just to show you what kind of a person Rabbi Akiva was, so he was the Rebbe of Rabbi Shimon. Now, he had many students. We know, of course, that Lag BaOmer really gets its name from being part of the Omer days. So Rabbi Akiva had 24,000 students, actually, which unfortunately in that Tekufa passed away. And after that, Rabbi Shimon and a few other students were all he was left with, and he began teaching again to these students, and that's the time period we're talking about, during the Roman persecution. Now, Rabbi Akiva tells Rabbi Shimon at a particular point before he rose to the greatness that he eventually accomplished, and said, listen, it's enough that I and God recognize your greatness, because at that point he wasn't well known, and yet, of course, he was one of the great students of Rabbi Akiva, but he didn't reach this unbelievable stature that we know of today. So he said, I know how great you are, and Hashem knows, and that's enough for you right now. And in fact, he was perhaps one of the greatest students of Rabbi Akiva. When we look at the Gemara itself, of course, Rabbi Shimon is one of the opinions in the Gemara, one of the Tanaic opinions, and we find many times arguments in the Gemara. Rabbi Shimon holds like this, Rabbi Yehuda like this, Rabbi Meir like that. And, each opinion is a valid opinion. And then the Gemara has to deal with how to finally conclude, whether to be strict or lenient, which opinion to rely on. And it shifts from rabbi to rabbi. There is there are klalim that sometimes particular rabbis have more authority, but there's no official klalim. Sometimes it switches. Now, from looking at the Gemara, one would not walk away saying that Rabbi Shimon was the greatest Tana ever, because he has opinions, and other Tanaim have opinions, and they're all, of course, great scholars. We can't even begin to understand the true level of each of their understandings, but we don't always conclude the halach like Rabbi Shimon. In many cases in the Gemara, the halach is not like Rabbi Shimon, the halach is like someone else. So for that reason, many rabbis ask, very nice, Rabbi Shimon has, was a great Tana, but we see in the Gemara that sometimes we don't follow him, sometimes we do. Where do we get this idea that he becomes the greatest of rabbis, and that we should, every word that he says is Kadosh Elyon? So the truth is, we have to understand that when Rabbi Shimon is speaking in the Gemara, he's speaking as a halachic authority of that time, and in that sense, there were many halachic authorities. However, when Rabbi Shimon was zocheh to be the conduit through which God chose to reveal the secrets of Torah in that time, again, when Moshe Rabbeinu received the Torah at Mount Sinai, he got the entire Torah. We're taught that he got the revealed Torah and also the hidden Torah. And that includes Kabbalah, the secrets of the Torah. However, he revealed and taught publicly and openly the revealed aspect of Torah to all of the Jewish people. That includes all of the halachot and even a lot of the different ideology that we have today. All of the books that we study in school, all this is part of the revealed Torah, the Gemara and the Mishnah, and even all the different hashkafa that comes from Midrash. A unique part of the wisdom of Torah that God gave Moshe was kept hidden. The hidden Torah of Kabbalah was not taught publicly, but reserved for the Jewish leaders, and of them, amongst the leaders, even the most elite and biggest scholars of each generation. It was taught person to person, from leader to teacher to student, and it was a hidden wisdom from the time of Moshe Rabbeinu throughout Jewish history. It wasn't something that was accessible to the masses then. Now comes the 2,000 years ago, which is again around the Common Era, after the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. The world no longer is going to have prophecy anymore. And again, this is many years from the Matan Torah. Matan Torah to the Common Era is roughly 1,500 years. I'm not a historian, but I guess we'll go with that number. If it's off, you guys can adjust it at home. You Google it and get the exact numbers. So basically, 1,500 years later, after the Jewish people were working on themselves and working with the Torah, so there was a collective spiritual result. The forces of evil that were unfortunately unleashed in the earlier days were weaker. And God saw fit to reveal at that point in time secrets of Torah that until then were not revealed. And he chose Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai to be the teacher of these secrets of Torah. So from Moshe Rabbeinu until Rabbi Shimon, there was no one that came and revealed Torah in the way that Rabbi Shimon did through the Zohar. Again, about 2,000 years later, the Arizal comes and reveals further more secrets that until then had not been revealed. So we have like almost 3 periods of time where a great tzaddik, a great Jewish leader, stood up and was responsible for the giving of Torah to some degree. Moshe Rabbeinu, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, and the Ari. Now, interestingly enough, when we talk about Moshe Rabbeinu giving the Torah to the Jewish people, so there's a verse that talks about the great accomplishment that is represented in his struggle, and we know from the Midrash that he actually had to fight with the angels that didn't want to give that the Torah should be given to us. So the verse brought over there is Alita lamarom, you ascended upon high to the higher places in the spiritual realms, Vishavita shevi, and you were able to steal away from them this prized possession, the Torah. You were able to capture it from Shemayim and bring it down to earth. This is the great accomplishment Moshe Rabbeinu did in bringing the Torah to us. And we say in the Gemara Menachot, the Torah is not in Shemayim. The Torah is here, it's ours. Unbelievable thing that he was able to steal it away from Shemayim, the Torah, and give it to us. The letters of the word Shevi, which mean this great accomplishment of bringing Torah from heaven down to earth, this like when you go to battle and you win the war against your enemy, so what you're able to take from them, all of the wealth that they have that you take from them is called a Shevi. In English it's called the booty, like the spoils of war. So that's the term given. Shavita Shevi, the spoils of the benefit of this battle, you fought the angels, now we have Torah here on earth. So the letters for Shevi are Shin, Bet, Yud. Now, if we look at Rabbi Shimon's name, so his name is hinted to in the Rashi Tevot of the Shevi, Shin, Bet, Yud. Shin, Shimon, Ben, Yochai, Shin, Bet, Yud. So the mystics of his time explained that there's a hint to Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai in this pasuk. Alita lamarom, Shavita Shevi. Just like Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Shemayim and brought down a revelation of Torah, in a similar sense, not in the exact same sense, because it was all given to Moshe Rabbeinu, but in a similar sense, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, by virtue of his great holy and exalted neshama, was able to ascend on high and bring down the Torah of Kabbalah and reveal it in the Zohar, and that's Shevi. Alita lamarom Shavita Shevi. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai is the next great tzaddik that was able to be responsible for a new revelation, a new galut of Torah, of a level of Torah, a dimension of Torah that was until then concealed and limited. Like I said, 2,000 years later comes along the Arizal. And the Arizal again reveals Torah in a similar way that the Rabbi Shimon did. And the writings of the Arizal today are considered to be the deepest, most intricate, that talk about the highest levels of creation and existence, from the moment that God decided to create and how creation ends up connecting with an infinite being of God. Some of the deepest ideas you can even think of are written in the writings of the Arizal, and anyone today that is considered a mystic, a Kabbalist, has to learn the writings of the Ari, and of course the Zohar and the other Sfarim that are involved. And so if we look at the actual Rashi Tevot of the Ari's name also, it's Yitzchak ben Shlomo. It's the same letters, Shevi, because we say also on the Arizal that he, by virtue of his great neshama, his sandak was actually Eliyahu Hanavi. Eliyahu Hanavi came to the father of the Ari and said, when your son's going to have Brit Milah, wait until you see me. And he came and he sat on the chair, and he was the sandak for the Ari. And of course, we know that the Ari was Zocher to Gil Eliyahu Hanavi, that Eliyahu Hanavi came and taught him all the secrets of the Torah that he revealed later. And he was constantly teaching him and constantly by him. The unbelievable experience, that level of Kedusha and that the Ari reached. And so he's also in the same pasuk, Alita lamarom shavita shevi, that he went to the heavens and brought down another revelation of Torah. As a matter of fact, it's great that these two rabbis are connected, and it's fitting because really it's through the Arizal that the minhag of Lag BaOmer is what it is today, which we're going to talk about. Just to speak a bit about the praise and the stature of Rabbi Shimon a little bit, there's a song that was composed about Rabbi Shimon. It starts off like this. Ish Elokim Kadoshu. He was a truly godly man, holy. Fortunate is the man whose eyes were able to see this great tzaddik Rabbi Shimon. Interesting point we'll mention as a side point. Okay, in Kabbalah it's taught that when you see the face of a tzaddik, of a Talmid Chacham, of your teacher, it helps complete your wisdom as well. And that was an idea. That's the deeper meaning behind going to see your Rebbe. Is it helps you attain the full Torah knowledge and the teachings that you receive from him. So fortunate is the person that would see Rabbi Shimon, because he was able to, just by seeing him, you were able to be mashlim, complete, and grow in Torah understanding just by seeing Rabbi Shimon. Anyway, it praises him in an incredible way and says that the verse in the Torah, when God wrote in the Torah, Na'aseh Adam, let us make man. So the song also praises him and says that Na'aseh Adam ne'emar ba'avurecha. That verse that said, let us make man, was said for Rabbi Shimon. And of course, those that are similar to him. Meaning that these true tzaddikim that completely emulate the ways of God and become a godly person in the world, as it says that man was made in the image of God, so they become the real essence of what that verse meant. Na'aseh Adam ba'avurecha, that phrase, let us make man, was fulfilled through people like great rabbis like Rabbi Shimon and the Ari and Moshe Rabbeinu, and they truly emulated their maker. They were really lived the life and expressed what it means to be in the image of Hashem, so to speak. It also says in the song that the rainbow was not seen in his days. This is very interesting to appreciate what that means. The rainbow, of course, we saw after the flood, and it's a sign that God won't destroy the world, and it's a sign that God, that sent that we need this protection and promise from God because we believe we deserve to be destroyed. So in the days of Rabbi Shimon, he was that protection. He was that sign. We did not need to see a rainbow because he was in the world protecting the generation. He says about himself, it's recorded in Chazal, he says that if he talks about the idea of men of ascent, the term in Hebrew is Bnei Aliyah, which translates loosely to men of ascent. What it means to be a man of ascent doesn't just mean a man who's always striving to be better, which is, of course, the tzaddikim are always striving to be better. But we're talking about spiritually a person whose soul comes from the highest of places where souls come from. And so these truly tzaddikim, that are the men of ascent, men of aliyah, that have souls from the realm of Atzilut, the Hasidic Svarim talk about, that's what it means, are destined almost, as long as they fulfill their role in the world, to be Jewish leaders. Their souls are special souls that are inclusive souls, that include all of their students and all of their generation, in the way that Moshe Rabbeinu, it says that all of the Klal Yisrael were included within him. He was a general soul that included all of the 600,000, which represents all of the Jewish souls of that generation, in his neshama, included all of theirs. That's why it says, that he represented, in a general sense, the whole generation. And so too, tzaddikim like Rabbi Shimon have a similar sense. So this Bnei Aliyah, he says, if there's 100 Bnei Aliyah, I and my son are one of them. He goes down in number, and he says, and if there's only 2, it's me and my son are among them. And if there's 1, we understand from there that if he was really the foundation of the world, Tzaddik Yisod Olam. That's what we understand from that Gemara over there. He also makes a statement saying that he, by virtue of his zechut, could exempt the whole generation up from creation until his time from the chovot of the negative deeds. He would be able to argue and fight, and in his zechut he could be poter all the time till him punishment. And he said if he would have a son with him, it would even be more than that. Anyway, those are two ideas to talk a little bit, understand a little bit about his greatness. But let's move on now to understanding the actual Lag BaOmer and what's behind it. And so, again, as I said, from the Arizal, we were taught really all of this. And he explains like this. There's really a connection between Rabbi Akiva and the death of his students and this unique day of Lag BaOmer. So what happens? The days of Omer are considered days of judgment, Yemei Din. And there's different levels of din. There's a level of din which is much more harsh, and its nature is to be more critical and punish. And then there's a more developed state of din of judgment, which is less harsh. So the beginning of the days of the Omer are very harsh days and very critical days. At the same time, the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva, their souls were rooted in this level of judgment, of din. And so, since they were guilty of not living up to their full potential, and that the Gemara records that they did not respect each other properly, and these are very critical times, so the judgment was harsh on them, and it was decreed that all of these 24,000 students that were guilty of this shortcoming, since it was decreed upon them that they would all die. Now, the period of time that is called this harsh period, there's a shift in the middle of the days of the Omer where the chesed, kindness, starts to become revealed, and everything shifts and it softens up. There's not as much scrutiny. That unique moment where things shift is the 33rd day of the Omer, and things shift then. So, although the Gemara itself says that they died between Pesach and Atzeret, which means from Pesach to Shavuot, the Midrash says pras. It uses a phrase which implies the 34th of the Omer. From the Ari, we understand that and based on Kabbalah, that everything really stopped on the 33rd of the Omer. Now, that day is special not only because students stopped dying, because if we'll ask ourselves, why do we celebrate so much on the 33rd of the Omer because the students stopped dying? Guess what? They all died. They stopped dying because there were no more left. So that's not something to be happy about and to make a party about. Imagine someone has a house, it's burning, right? And it stopped burning when it was all burnt. So we celebrate that the house stopped burning. No, the house burnt down. We lost 24,000 precious, chachamim. There's nothing to celebrate about that. They didn't, if many of them were spared, that's one thing to be happy about. And still we wouldn't turn it into the day of celebration because of the respect for those that passed away. So we have to ask ourselves, why in the world do we celebrate? And this becomes one of the happiest days of the year. So it certainly cannot be because they stopped dying, because they all died. So the truth is that on that particular day, Rabbi Akiva, beside his students stopped dying, he went and took 5 other students that were his that didn't die, because those students represented a much higher level of completion. They were from a higher level, and they weren't included in the 24,000 that died. One of those students is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, I believe that's the last name, but if not, the first name is Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, and Rabbi Yosei. These 5 students were the 5 students that he continued to teach after these 24,000 passed away, and he gave them smicha, and in fact, it's through these 5 students that the entire oral tradition of Torah and the whole legacy of Torah that began with Moshe was able to continue, because with the death of 24,000 students, the whole kiyum, the whole continuity of Torah was in jeopardy. And through these 5 students and the fact that Rabbi Akiva continued to teach on, the Torah continues to exist the way we have it today. Most of all the writings we have are from these students. Every Mishnah, a Stam Mishnah, is from Rabbi Meir. Then there's the Sifra and the Sifri. These are from the other rabbis, and it's mentioned in detail. It's mentioned somewhere. And most of what we have in writing is from the students of Rabbi Akiva. And so basically, through Rabbi Akiva and these new students is how we still have the Torah today in its functioning manner that we have it. So with this, we can appreciate really what we're celebrating. And what comes out from the writings of the Ari, aside from the deeper Kabbalistic ideas behind this, is that this unique day, the 33rd day of the Omer, is a day that represents the shifting from harsh judgment to more chesed, to more kindness and mercy. And it's on that day that the Torah that was in jeopardy of being lost is saved through these 5 students. And that's what we celebrate. It's a day of joy and celebration because it's almost like on a certain level, like a day of giving the Torah. We could read the verse, Yismechu hashamayim v'tagel haaretz, that the heavens rejoiced and the earth were gladdened because Torah will continue. Now, and that's what we celebrate. Not that they stopped dying because there were no more to die. Now, we still want to appreciate why specifically is this whole allure surrounded by Rabbi Shimon. There were 5 students. And for that reason, the Ben Ish Chai himself writes in his book about Lag BaOmer that really it would be appropriate to also go to Rabbi Akiva's grave. Those that live in Tiberia should go to Rabbi Akiva, and those that can't should go to Rabbi Meir, and those that are on their way back to Tzfat should stop at Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai. So we see the other Tanaim involved in this day of getting smicha and the day of like a new giving of Torah are all included in the simcha. But we have to know why Rabbi Shimon is unique and it's more him than anyone else. So for that, we could understand from what I started discussing. Since he was the unique rabbi that taught the Kabbalah, which is, again, what started being revealed in his time, and in that level, he was above everybody else. You know, we talk about, again, in the Gemara, when we argue, Rabbi Shimon argues, we don't always follow him. But in the Zohar, so his word in the Zohar, it's a higher level of revelation, and we don't argue against Rabbi Shimon in the Zohar. So he had that special, unique status, and he was essentially the Rebbe of his generation in that sense. And so that's probably why it's focused around him more than anybody else. Now, just to appreciate, you know, how important this day is, and how, you know, how we all have an opportunity and, you know, to partake and to join in and again teach it to our children, is so there's a few ideas also recorded in the time of the Arizal. The rabbis wanted to cancel this whole celebration at Lag BaOmer. And the Ari was telling his students that I see that, you know, through prophetic vision, Ruach HaKodesh it's called, not a full level of prophecy, but through Ruach HaKodesh, the Ari was aware that the rabbis of his generation wanted to cancel Lag BaOmer. They said it's not appropriate for men and women to be associated together, women dressed up in fancy clothing. They felt it was a little bit too much pritzut, too much not appropriate in such a holy place as the kever of Rabbi Shimon, so they wanted to cancel Lag BaOmer. So the Ari told his students that, you know, if they do that, then it's very possible that Rabbi Shimon will be upset, makpid, about his kavod on this day of celebration, and it could be a plague could break out in the Jewish people, and many people could get killed. So his main student, Rav Chaim Vital, responds by saying, so why don't you go tell them not to do it? He asks his Rabbi, why don't you tell them not to do it? So he answers that because they don't really believe in me, and they're not, you know, they're not going to listen. So he asks permission, can I go and speak in your name? So he says, you can go. So Rav Chaim Vital goes to the Bedin and explains to them everything that his teacher said, and some of them believed him, some of them didn't believe him, and so they said, you know what, tell your teacher to come to us. So they summoned him, and he went, and he explained to them the situation, and he said, listen, usually the leaders of a community are responsible to protect their people from sin, and if they sin, so the leaders are responsible for the sin. That's how far it goes. He said, but you know what? Leave this day of Lag BaOmer. Let the people do their celebration. And on this day, you're not responsible. Whoever sins will be responsible for himself, and you won't be responsible. And they took his advice, and they left the day intact. So you see, even back then, there were people that were speaking against and perhaps trying to cancel the celebration. Even today, we have different people that have their opinions. Some try to speak out and say it's not a good thing. There's no point in going. And again, their main concern is obviously the idea of mixing too many, you know, people, men and women together without proper separation and without proper tzniut. And these are concerns we have to address and do our best to work on. But it seems from this incident that canceling the whole celebration there is clearly not one of the options. Another 1 or 2 points brought so we can understand how serious of a day this is and how intense it is. So Rav Chaim Vital decides in the writings of the Ari to really prove that this day is a valid, authentic day of celebration. It's not just a custom that happened and has no real base. And he explains, first he brings a story with the Ari that that 8 years prior, the Ari came with his family from Egypt. Now imagine the trouble it would take to travel in those days from Egypt to Miron to celebrate on Lag BaOmer by the kever of the Rashbi. But after saying that, he says, but I'm not sure if the Ari at that point reached the full level of understanding of the secrets of Kabbalah. So the fact that he came 8 years ago doesn't prove that this day is a special, authentic day. Could be that he did it because it was the custom for everyone to do. So he says, but a year, the first year that the Ari was in Tzfat, when this is before Rav Chaim Vital himself was there, he was told over by the different Talmidim there that year the Ari came with his whole family, stayed for 3 days celebrating for Lag BaOmer, and also cut his son's hair as is custom to do today. From there we have a proof that there's something to this custom, because at that point the Ari was expert in the secrets of Kabbalah, and for him to go through all that effort to come there and celebrate shows its authenticity. Now, I just want to clarify, we're not saying that the Ari made up the minhag. The minhag was an old minhag that people were doing. We're just saying that he supported the minhag and also acted in that way, and he explains the Al Pi Kabbalah why that particular day is so special. So through the Ari, the day has a confirmation of its authenticity and that it's a true, special, holy day for the Jewish people. Another very, very frightening story is that on that same year that the Ari went with his family, before Rav Chaim Vital became his student, so they were there celebrating, and one of the great rabbis, Rabbi Rav Avram Alevi, who had a custom to mourn the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash every day of the year. So while he was there celebrating on Lag BaOmer, he, in the Shemona Esrei prayer, added the insert of Nachem, which mentions the mourning of the Beis HaMikdash. And while that was happening, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai himself came to the kever and spoke to the Arizal, telling him that because this rabbi, Rabbi Avraham Alevi, tell him that because he did Nachum at my kever on this day of celebration, that he's going to receive consolations, consolements very soon, because and within the month one of his children died. This is a very frightening idea to think about. Well, unfortunately, because he made the mistake and he expressed customs of mourning over the Beis HaMikdash in this place of joy, so he was punished harshly. And so again, Rav Yaakov Hillel explains what was the basis for this punishment, what was so wrong about what he did. So again, the real reason is because this day is a day of joy because the Torah is protected on that day. The Torah is saved on that day. This day there's a kiyum of Torah. So it's like a mini giving of the Torah that day, that the Torah was saved. That's the reason why it's a day of great joy, and that's why it's forbidden to do mourning and to do other things. We don't say tachanun. And so he was a big rabbi. On his level, he was punished. And obviously, we're not, some rabbis explain that it could be that only in the particular kever, because you do that at the kever itself, so that was already more serious, and that's why he was punished. But from anywhere in the world, you don't have to. It's not as strict. We don't have to be scared. But just to show you how serious of a day we're talking about, it's not to be taken lightly. Anyway, on another note, it is a day of great joy and great simcha and festivity, but it's a day that we all should think about. What are we celebrating? It's just making a barbecue, throwing another burger, another hot dog. It's a celebration because we merited that God did not abandon us and not leave us in the dark, because without Torah, we are in utter darkness. And he made sure that we had 5 new students to come and teach the next generation and generations to come. And we have to strengthen our connection with Torah and, of course, mitzvot, emulating these righteous tzaddikim. We don't just go there to party at their kever, but we were going there because we want to express how we believe in what they lived for. Living a holy life, a true life, not a party life. And so although we celebrate, it shouldn't be in a way of lightheadedness. It should be in a way of koved rosh, as all celebrations according to the Jewish ways, koved rosh. It's with a seriousness and a clarity of what we're celebrating for and what we're here for. I just want to conclude with a small remez. It's interesting because what is the idea of joy from a Jewish perspective? So the pasuk says, "Ivdu at Hashem bisimcha," serve God with joy, bisimcha. The letters bisimcha spell out also the word machshava. So we don't mean, when we say to be besimcha, we don't mean absent-minded. We mean specifically, you have to be thinking about how to be besimcha properly, and what you're being besimcha for. And if there's no base to the simcha, then it's not real simcha. It's frivolity. It's nothingness. So we're joyous because we're God's people, and God didn't abandon us, and we're going to merit again the coming of the Mashiach, which is He's going to reveal another level of Torah, which will be the conclusion of this story. From Moshe until the Mashiach, we're in the middle of the story, and it says that the Mashiach will come and reveal even a newer dimension, a higher dimension in the Torah. That Torah is going to begin with the letter Aleph. Today we have a Torah that begins with the letter Bet, and a deeper, higher level of that Torah will be revealed, which starts with the letter Aleph, and that's we're going to see the real deepest of the secrets and the real reasons behind all of the mitzvot will be revealed. B'ezrat Hashem b'meira b'yameinu. Okay, shkayach everyone.